The outpost liked to pretend it was still important. Every few hours, the corridor lights brightened just enough to impress no one, and the wall console coughed up diagnostics from tomorrow as if that would make me feel ahead of schedule. I stopped arguing with it after it predicted my own complaint 12 seconds before I said it. Turns out, sarcasm loses its edge when it arrives late. Outside, the air shimmered in that polite, unsettling way it had, like reality was clearing its throat but hadn't decided what to say yet. Dust hovered instead of falling, pausing mid-thought. I had learned not to trust stillness here. Stillness was usually busy. I found the air where the southern perimeter used to be, except the perimeter had shifted again, so technically I found them somewhere between yesterday's fence and tomorrow's mistake. They were slumped against a piece of machinery I didn't remember installing, which meant I probably would later. Their skin caught the light wrong, not reflecting it so much as rearranging it, faint patterns drifting beneath like constellations trying to remember their names. "Please don't be dead," I muttered, kneeling. "I'm underqualified for that outcome." Their eyes opened before I touched them. Not suddenly, more like they'd been open in another moment and decided to include this one. When they focused on me, it felt like being examined by several versions of the same thought. "You say that again," they whispered, voice arriving a fraction too early, "and you mean it less." "Great," I said, "a critic." The med scanner clipped to my belt beeped in protest as I powered it up. The display flickered between readings, settling on something that looked like a shrug translated into numbers. Alive. Not yet. Previously. I tapped the screen. "Pick a tense," I told it. "I'm trying to run a rescue here, not a philosophy seminar." The scanner emitted a tone that I was beginning to interpret as passive-aggressive. I angled it over the heir's chest. Their injuries didn't behave. Wounds folding in and out of visibility, edges blurring as if undecided. I wrapped a field bandage around where the damage insisted on being most of the time. "You're not equipped," the heir said, watching me with that layered calm. "No," I agreed. "But I am stubborn, which in my experience is 80% of medicine." They almost smiled. It happened slightly out of sync, like the idea of a smile arrived first and the muscles caught up later. Beneath my hands their pulse, if that's what it was, didn't follow a rhythm so much as a pattern. Not beats exactly. Occasions. "Name?" I asked because it felt like something people did in moments like this. They paused, or maybe they didn't. "You call me heir," they said. "That's not a name." "It is where I come from." "Right," I said, tightening the bandage. "Well, where I come from, that's a job description, and a risky one." The outpost chimed from somewhere behind me, a hollow notification that usually meant nothing and occasionally meant worse. I glanced over my shoulder. The horizon wavered, not dramatically, just enough to suggest it had opinions. For a second, I thought I saw movement where there shouldn't be any, a distortion sliding against the wind like something walking just off-beat with the world. "Tell me I imagined that," I said. "You will," the heir replied gently. "Later." "Comforting," I said. I love pre-approved denial. I helped them to their feet. They were lighter than they looked, or maybe gravity was being flexible again. As we started back toward the outpost, the ground beneath us shifted by a fraction, the path aligning itself to a version of the camp I hadn't walked yet. I didn't comment on it. You don't argue with terrain that hasn't decided to exist consistently. Halfway to the door, the wind stilled. Not quiet stilled, as if it had run into something it couldn't pass through. Dusk gathered along an invisible edge, outlining absence with unsettling precision. I stopped. "Okay," I said softly. "That's new." "It isn't," the heir answered. "Of course it isn't," I sighed. "Why would anything be new when it can be worse instead?" The edge shifted just slightly, like breath against glass. I felt it then, not a presence exactly, but a pressure, as if the space around us was occupied by something that refused to line up with our moment. "We should go," I said. "We are going," the heir replied. "That's not what I—" "We are," they said again, and there was a weight in it, a certainty that didn't belong to now. I didn't argue. I got them inside, sealed the door, and leaned against it, listening to nothing in a way that felt crowded. The console flickered. A new diagnostic scrolled across the screen, time-stamped 3 minutes from now. I read it anyway. Encirclement detected. I looked at the heir. They looked back, calm in a way that made me want to laugh or run or both. "Good news," I said. "We're about to be surrounded." They tilted their head. "Already are," they corrected, almost kindly. I exhaled, pushing away from the door. "Perfect," I muttered. I always wanted company, just didn't think it would arrive before itself. The door insisted on being locked twice, which was comforting in the same way repeating a bad joke makes it funnier, only if you're desperate. I stood there with my hand still on the panel, waiting for something to knock. Nothing did. That was worse. "Encirclement detected," I read aloud from the console again, because saying it felt like it might make it less true. "Fantastic. We've upgraded from isolation to attention." The air had settled onto the nearest surface that hadn't decided to disappear. They watched the room like it was unfolding in several directions at once. I tried not to think about how they seemed more at ease now than they had bleeding out in the dust. "Do they knock?" I asked. "No." "Good," I said. "I'd hate to have to be polite." The outpost lights flickered, then stabilized, then flickered again in a pattern that looked suspiciously like it was trying to communicate something and failing. I tapped the console. It responded by displaying a schematic of the camp that I did not recognize. Corridors extended where there had been walls. Storage rooms nested inside other storage rooms like a bad architectural joke. "I don't remember installing any of this," I muttered. "You will," the heir said. "Right. Future me is very productive. Present me with like a warning label." A soft thud echoed from somewhere down the corridor. Not loud, just out of place. I turned toward it slowly, like that would help me catch it in the act of being normal. Another sound followed, this one arriving before the first had quite finished. Footsteps. Almost. "Tell me those are pipes," I said. "They are not pipes." Great, I was getting tired of pipes anyway. I grabbed the nearest tool that looked vaguely defensive, which turned out to be a calibration rod. I held it like it might intimidate something that technically wasn't here yet. "You think they can come inside?" I asked. "They are inside," the heir replied. I paused. "You know, I'm starting to think you don't understand the concept of comforting." A shadow slid along the far wall. It didn't belong to anything I could see, and it didn't move like a shadow should. It paused near the corner, then shifted as if acknowledging us. I raised the calibration rod slightly. "Hi," I said. "We're closed." The shadow didn't respond. Rude. The heir watched it with quiet attention. "They are not here to negotiate." "Of course they're not," I said. "Why would anything in my life involve reasonable discussion?" The food synthesizer chimed suddenly behind me. I flinched, then glared at it. It had produced something that looked like a cube and smelled like regret. "Really?" I said. "Now, you think this is the moment for snacks?" It beeped cheerfully. I picked up the cube, sniffed it, and immediately regretted that decision. "If we survive this, I'm filing a complaint," I told it, "assuming the future still has paperwork." The air made a soft sound that might have been amusement, though it arrived a heartbeat too early to be certain. I tossed the cube aside and stepped closer to them. "Okay," I said, lowering my voice. "Let's talk about the army that isn't quite here. How do we stop them?" "We do not," they said. "Excellent plan," I replied, very proactive. "They are outcomes," the heir continued. "Not actions. They exist because something happens." "And that something is you," I said. They didn't deny it. Another step echoed down the corridor. This time I saw it, just a distortion, a ripple where the air folded wrong. It moved with intent, crossing the threshold of a doorway that hadn't been there this morning. My grip tightened on the rod. "Okay," I said quietly. "I officially don't like this." "You did not like it before," the air pointed out. "True, but now I don't like it more." The ripple paused, then shifted direction, like it had noticed my attention. For a moment, I had the strange, unmistakable feeling that something was looking back at me from a time I hadn't reached yet. I swallowed. Do they know me? Yes. Do I know them? Yes. I let out a slow breath. That's deeply inconvenient. The console beeped again. I glanced over. The encirclement alert had updated, the perimeter line tightening inward, red markers appearing one by one in places that didn't quite align with the walls. They're mapping us, I said. They already have, the heir replied. Of course they have. The lights dimmed briefly, then returned. In that flicker I saw more shadows than before, subtle, overlapping like echoes trying to agree on a single version of themselves. I straightened, forcing a grin I didn't entirely feel. All right, I said. Invisible, time-skipping army, glitching outpost, unhelpful food, I've had worse days. The heir tilted their head. You have not. Give it time, I said. Apparently, that's flexible here. Another ripple moved closer, just at the edge of vision. I didn't step back. I didn't step forward either. I just stood there between something that hadn't happened and someone who might make it happen. Stay behind me, I said, because it felt like the right thing to say, even if it was. You say that again, the heir murmured almost gently, and you mean it less. I tightened my grip on the rod. Yeah, I said. Well, I'm working on it. I woke up already tired of something I hadn't done yet. The ceiling above me flickered, hesitated, then decided to exist properly. I stared at it for a moment, waiting for it to disagree again. It didn't, suspicious. You're awake twice, the heir said from across the room. Only twice. I muttered, pushing myself up. Feels like I've been awake all week. You have, they replied. Of course I have. I rubbed my face and immediately paused. There was a faint smear of something on my hand, dark, dried, blood. I checked myself quickly. No injuries. I looked at the heir. That better not be mine from later, I said. It is not yours, they answered. That is somehow worse. The outpost hummed around us, but it wasn't the same hum. It had shifted pitch, like it had decided to tune itself to a different version of reality. The console blinked, displaying a log entry I didn't remember making. Transfer complete. I frowned. What did I transfer? You haven't yet, the heir said. Great, I sighed. I love doing things I don't understand ahead of time. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It sounded a little too sharp, a little too close to something else. I pointed at the console. If I start leaving myself helpful notes like "don't trust yourself," I'm officially done. You already have, the heir said. I walked over and pulled up the log history. There it was, my own voice recorded. I hesitated before playing it. Hi, I said from the speaker, sounding more optimistic than I felt. If you're hearing this, you're about to make a mistake, or you already did. Hard to tell, just maybe don't listen to them, or me. One of us is wrong. I stared at the console. Wow, I muttered. Past me is incredibly unhelpful. Not past, the heir corrected softly. Right, future me, even worse. A movement caught my eye. Not outside this time, inside. A reflection in the dark screen of a secondary panel. I turned slowly. For a split second I saw myself standing near the door, not where I was, not holding the calibration rod, empty hands, calm posture. Then it was gone. I blinked. Okay, I said quietly, that's new. It is not, the heir replied. Yeah, nothing is new, everything is terrible, I get it. I paced once, twice, trying to ground myself in something that felt consistent. The floor helped, mostly. It only shifted a little this time. I need rules, I said. Simple ones, like don't trust moving shadows, don't trust blinking consoles, and definitely don't trust myself. You trust yourself now, the heir said. Do I? I stopped thinking. That feels like a bad idea. Another memory slid into place uninvited. I saw myself standing exactly where I was, but the air was gone. The room was quieter, empty in a way that felt final. I remembered lowering my hand after pressing something on the console. Transfer complete. I sucked in a breath. I did something, I said. Yes. And it involved you. Yes. I glanced at them, then away. Did it save you? Yes. I hesitated. Did it kill you? They didn't answer immediately. When they did, their voice carried too many versions of itself. Yes. I let out a shaky laugh. That's efficient. The lights flickered again. In that brief dimness I saw them, more clearly this time. Shapes in the air, layered just slightly out of place. Not bodies, not quite, but arranged like soldiers, watching. One of them moved forward, not a step exactly. A shift. It closed the distance without crossing it. I raised the calibration rod instinctively. Hey, I said, personal space, big fan of it. The shape paused. For a moment I thought it tilted like it was considering me. They remember you, the air said. Fantastic, I replied. I barely remember me. Another memory hit harder this time. I saw myself again, but older somehow, standing among those shapes. Not fighting, not running, just there on their side. I staggered slightly. No, I muttered. No, I don't like that version of events. It is one version, the air said gently. Yeah, well, I vote we cancel it. I tightened my grip on the rod, though it felt increasingly useless. Tell me something simple, I said. Something that doesn't change. The air looked at me, their gaze steady across too many moments at once. You chose to help me, they said. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds like me. Questionable decisions with good intentions. Another ripple moved closer, almost within reach now. I could feel it, not touch but pressure, like standing near a storm that hadn't decided to break. I didn't move. Okay, I said quietly. New rule. The air waited. I exhaled, forcing a small, stubborn smile. Even if I betray you later, right now I don't. They watched me for a long moment, then just slightly out of sync they smiled. Yes, they said. The console stopped flickering. That was how I knew it was serious. No glitches, no helpful contradictions, no messages from a version of me that still believed in warnings. Just a steady display, clean and certain in a way that made my skin itch. Transfer ready. I stared at it, then at my own reflection in the dark edge of the screen. This time it didn't disappear. You're early, I said. Late, my reflection answered. Of course. Behind me the air pressed inward. Not violently, patiently. The shapes were closer now, layered thick enough that even my stubborn brain had to admit they were real, or real enough. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Every version of them had already seen how this ended. Tell me something, I said without turning. Do they ever get bored of winning? They do not win, the air replied. That's encouraging, I said. Means I still have a chance to disappoint everyone equally. I walked to the console, hands hovering over controls I somehow remembered without learning. My reflection did the same, a fraction ahead, like it was helping me cheat. You left me a message, I said. Very cryptic, very unhelpful. I respect the commitment. You wouldn't have listened, my reflection said. Fair. I glanced back at the air. They stood steady now, no longer fading in and out of certainty. Stronger or closer to something that looked like strength. You said I save you, I told them, and I kill you. Yes, still feels like overachieving. A ripple moved closer. One of the shapes extended, something like an arm, something like intent. It stopped just short of me as if waiting for permission. Are they going to stop me? I asked. No, the air said. See. I gestured vaguely toward the invisible crowd. Very polite apocalypse. I looked back at the console. Transfer ready blinked once, then held steady. No countdown, no urgency, just expectation. What exactly am I transferring? I asked. You, the air said. I paused. I was afraid you'd say that. My reflection nodded. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner, I repeated. I love when reality starts using words like that. Another memory slid into place, not sharp, not jarring, gentle. I saw myself standing here making the choice without hesitation. Not because I was certain, but because I was. I let out a slow breath. Okay, I said. Let me get this straight. If I stay, I eventually hand you over or join them or do something equally regrettable. Yes. If I don't, I remove myself from the timeline enough that none of that happens. Yes. And you live. Yes. I nodded once. All right, that's surprisingly straightforward for this place. The heir stepped closer. For once their voice arrived exactly when they spoke. You change things, they said. Yeah, I replied. About time I did something useful. I hesitated, then smirked slightly. Also, just to be clear, this doesn't involve paperwork, right? They tilted their head. No. Perfect, I'm in. I placed my hand on the console. My reflection mirrored me, and for a moment we were perfectly aligned. No delay, no contradiction. Hey, I said quietly, not looking back. Try not to rewrite the universe too aggressively, okay? Ease into it. The heir almost laughed. This time it wasn't early or late, it was right. I will try. Good enough. I pressed the control. The outpost didn't shake, the air didn't scream, everything just adjusted. The pressure around me shifted like a breath finally released. The shapes flickered, their edges losing definition, their certainty unraveling. My reflection stayed a moment longer. Not a bad ending, I said. It's not the end, it replied. Yeah, I smiled faintly. Figures. Then it was gone. The console went dark. The hum of the outpost softened, settling into something quieter, simpler. Outside, the horizon held steady for the first time since I'd arrived. The air stood alone. They looked at where I had been, not confused, not surprised, just aware of the space, of the absence, of the choice that had already happened. The distortions at the edge of reality thinned, then vanished like a thought no longer needed. The encirclement dissolved before it could exist. The air exhaled slowly. Thank you, they said, to a moment that no longer contained me. For a long while they stood there, watching a future that had changed shape. Then, with a small, steady motion, they turned and stepped forward into a timeline that no longer remembered the one who had chosen it. And for the first time, nothing answered before it happened. We've reached the end of another story. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes, and stay tuned.